Hello and welcome to the Covert Nerd Podcast. Today we take a look back at the comics we reviewed this year, then we'll take a look at two more fantastic titles. Lastly, we'll also take a look at the future for this podcast. So let's dive right in and nerd it up. So many good comics this year and so little time. I listed them all, and then I decided to rank them, which was no easy task. I read so many this year, and it was great to get back into comics again after being only a part-time reader. I had a lot of fun looking for comics that I'd missed over the last 20 years or so, and a few new titles from new publishers, artists, and writers. There's some good young talent out there. This talent that's here right now is like the talent that I got into when I got into comics back in the late 80s and 90s. This talent right now that got me back into comics is some of the similar type of talent that got me into comics originally back in the late 80s and early 90s. Those guys that I liked back in the 80s and 90s are now in charge of some of those publishing companies now. Keep an eye on these men and women because in 20 years, I think they're going to be running the comic book industry. Back to the comics of the year, though. If I reviewed or mentioned them on the podcast, then in my opinion, they were some of the best. This will be a very brief run through of the 14 comic titles I reviewed this year. The list will be in the show notes on covertnerd.net if you want to go and check it out. I can confidently recommend any of these, and I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. Number 14, Monstrous by Image Comics. Number 13, Essex County by Image Comics. I Kill Giants by Image Comics. Ninjak vs. the Valiant Universe by Valiant. Plume by Devil's Duent. Y, The Last Man by Vertigo. Dark Arc by Aftershock. The Long Con by Oni Comics. Number 6, Black Hammer by Dark Horse. Number 5, The Secret Six by DC Comics. I want to reiterate that these comics aren't necessarily new titles. It's just what I read and reviewed this year that I thought was worth mentioning on the podcast. So I have the last four here. And I want to preface before I mention the last four that almost all of these probably could be number ones, just depending on the day. However, like anything, there can only be number one. Let's start with the final four here. Britannia by Valiant. Now, any of them you can read. There's several volumes, but starting with the first volume obviously would help the story make more sense. It's an excellent title by Valiant, and I highly recommend you check it out. Number 3, Faith by Valiant. Thankfully, you can pick up any of these at any point and it will make sense. But why miss out on all the fun? Just start at the beginning and pick up Faith by Valiant. Again, two great Valiant titles right there. I think Valiant is probably one of the underrated publishers out there in the comic book industry today. They really do have some good stories. Number 2, East of West by Image Comics. Now, who doesn't like an alternative history heading toward the apocalypse? It's a fascinating story with more plot twists and turns than a roundabout. Unlike the previous two, though, you will have to start at the beginning to have even a remote chance of understanding what's going on. And even if you do start at the beginning, it can still get a little confusing because there are just so many characters and so many different, like I said, plot lines and storylines to go with. But I highly recommend East of West by Image Comics. Last but not least, Invincible by Image Comics. Created by Robert Kirkman and artist Cory Walker. Illustrated by Ryan Ottley. Again, another nice young talent. From the beginning to end, I just couldn't stop reading it. I stumbled upon it and read one of the issues and just couldn't put it down. I didn't find this until a few months before the last issue was published. So I was able to binge for almost 2 months straight, and that's all I pretty much read for 2 months was Invincible. The story and the art are fantastic. The story is tight. It doesn't veer much from Mark Grayson, the main character, and how he deals with being a half-human on Earth. I love the fact that Kirkman didn't try to keep the series going and try to milk the title for all that he could, because he could have done that and gotten even more and still publishing it today. I can see him, though, maybe doing possibly a few one-shots here and there, telling some side stories that weren't really fleshed out in the main story. If he doesn't, I'm okay with that, though. He started a good story and ended it when he thought he was done telling a good story. And that's the way it should be. I would say grab all 144 issues, lock yourself in a room for the entire weekend, and you'll come out not regretting it, in my opinion. So there you go. The 14 comics I reviewed this year, and the top and ranking them from 14 to number 1. So let me know your thoughts on these 14. Do you agree? Disagree? Do you like them? They stink? Give me your thoughts on what you think of those 14 different comics that I reviewed this year. Next, 2 more comics that I found, and I did find this one almost before I put this together, but not quite, so it'll have to wait for the 2019 list, I guess. That is Joe Golem by Dark Horse Comics. I'll read you the solicit here, and then we'll get into the details of it. 40 years after disaster left lower Manhattan submerged in 30 feet of water, children have begun disappearing below the surface. In this new series, Joe Golem hunts the terrifying creature that has been pulling children into the depths of the canals. Mignola and Golden are the 2 creators of this, and Mignola is the same creator of Hellboy. He created this Noir-esque detective book fueled by an alternate history, and their usual twist of spiritual macabre is in the title. They have crafted a masterful story. Patrick Reynolds does some of the creepy artwork here, from the creepiness of the water to the flashback scenes giving us a little of Joe's history. The art is wonderful and clean. He provides the art of the gloomy world and the grainy style of pencils which suits the somewhat sunken world. The comic is based on a novel by the same name. Joe investigates the strange events in the now partially sunken New York City. They also slowly reveal Joe's mysterious background. The book has a good mix of horror without much of the gore. I also like the fact that the stories are only 2 to 3 issues with a thread of a constant underlying story through each one of them. If you like noir mysteries, then you're going to love Joe Golem. I highly recommend you pick up this title. You won't be disappointed. The next one is an older title, over 30 years old, Saga of the Swamp Thing. The Swamp Thing first appeared in the House of Secrets number 92 in July of 1971 by DC Comics, in a standalone horror story set in the early 20th century. Now, I'm reading the Alan Moore collection because I had heard that this collection was fantastic. So far, I would have to agree. I started these books knowing almost nothing about Swamp Thing other than he was a character from DC who became Swamp Thing after a lab accident. The writing has some of the bizarre and grittiness of Moore, which is why people tend to like his style since he doesn't pull any punches with his subjects that he tries to tackle. I like in Volume 1, he mixes in a few other DC characters like Batman, Lex Luthor, and John Constantine. The art of the 4-volume collection is done by Stephen Bissette, John Tolteben, Dan Day, Rick Vetch, and overall the art has the 80s look and feel, which I do like. It's a bit rough, but that adds to the darker feel of Swamp Thing, in my opinion. I'm amazed still at these old-time artists who did it all by hand and still have such details. They didn't skimp anywhere, especially when you're doing a title like this with vines and other plant life and vegetation that can be extremely complicated. You can grab Saga of Swamp Thing in a collection. You can pick it up, I believe, on Amazon or any other place you can get your comics, and you will love it. I guarantee you. It's Alan Moore, so you kind of know if you've read Watchmen what to expect. At the time of this recording, it's almost the end of the year. In fact, it's New Year's Eve. And I want to thank you, the listener, for your time and your support of this podcast. I really appreciate the time that you give me. It means a lot to me. I love the interaction that I've had over this last year with listeners, with fellow podcasters. It is so important to me, and it gives me a lot of energy when somebody likes a tweet that I put out, or retweets an episode, or just shoots me an email and says, hey, I like that episode. That puts a lot of gas in my tank. So thank you so much for your support in this podcast. Please visit covertnerd.net to subscribe on Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. Pretty much works on any of them. I do want to take a second to thank some of the other fellow podcasters that have been on this show or have helped in some way, shape, or form. Art of Lee Bachma, check him out on Facebook. All the guys at the Podcast Arcade. Also, Healthy Under Pressure with Amber Pankinen. But go to their websites, and I'll put the links in the show notes. Please check them out. Also, the guys at the Rad Year Podcast. Also, Drinking at Bible Study and Not Your Pastor's Podcast. I've had some interaction with all those guys, and I really appreciate their feedback. So thank you for listening, and until next time, nerd it up.